When an avoidant has their fears triggered, they look to create emotional distance between themselves and their partner. Emotional distance is what makes them feel safe. This goes back to childhood, when this person had their emotional needs neglected. Their feelings were dismissed. They were not able to express themselves the way they needed as a kid, and they weren't nurtured either. So what they learned is that emotional closeness isn't safe. They relied on their parents or their caretakers for their emotional needs. They were disappointed, rejected, perhaps even abandoned. So now, as an adult, emotional closeness doesn't feel safe. And when things get too close, the avoidant deactivates. Deactivation is when they start to take their feelings, they suppress them, they bury them. And they will deploy strategies to create emotional distance, to assist them in suppressing their feelings. So let's get into the top 3 deactivation strategies that avoidants are most likely to use in relationships. The first one is avoiding intimacy, creating distance between themselves and their partner. This can be in the form of communication or physical intimacy. They can start withdrawing from physical intimacy or even physical touch. They might recoil when you go to hold their hand. And now they're suddenly never in the mood when it comes to physical intimacy. Their communication will dwindle. They'll seem more cold. They'll seem more distant. They're taking longer to respond to your messages. They're not really returning your calls. And when you're trying to make plans, they won't commit to a time. They give you very vague answers. But when you ask them if everything is okay, they tell you everything's fine. They're just busy at work or some other excuse. They stop using the kissy face emojis. They feel less sweet, less romantic, and you can tell that there's a shift in them, but they're not telling you why. This can create a lot of anxiety in the person that's being distanced from, because you don't know why there's a sudden change. And you're probably blaming yourself, thinking that it must be something that you did to cause this shift. In reality, something triggered their fears, and most likely it was growing emotional closeness in the relationship, or perhaps a small disagreement, but something that indicated that it's a real relationship, not just a fantasy. And real relationships involve real commitment, real emotional closeness, and sometimes disagreements and expectations. Those will feel overwhelming to the avoidant, reminds them of their childhood, and they seek to create distance. And they'll do that by creating both emotional and physical distance. All right, let's get into number 2. Number 2 is cheating. It is really hard to have emotional closeness to somebody that you're betraying. When you're sleeping with somebody else, having an emotional affair with someone else, it's really hard to be intimate with your primary partner because you're betraying them. It creates emotional distance. It helps the avoidant feel safe, but it also gives them a dopamine rush. They're getting the infatuation from the affair, all that dopamine, the oxytocin, the feel-good hormones that go off in the brain when there's attention and infatuation in a new relationship. Also, the taboo aspect of the affair will give them an additional dopamine rush. It feels exciting, and they're creating emotional distance. They're getting that external validation that they crave. They have a low self-esteem and rely on external validation, and they're also creating emotional distance. Cheating can actually be an addictive behavior for an avoidant because it helps them feel safe, and it gives them that dopamine that they crave. And many avoidants that cheat actually turn out to be serial cheaters, and it's because of that dopamine and the need for distance. But really hard to be close to somebody that you're cheating on. Let's get into number 3. Number 3 is fault finding. Looking for little flaws in your partner to justify the fears. That's what the avoidant will do. It can be very small things like the way you talk, the way you drink your coffee, you sip it too loud, the way that you look for reassurance, the way that you express your affection, the way you dress, the way you have your hair, the way that you're always punctual, the expectations you have on them. Very small little things, but they look for flaws. Maybe your driving habits. They're looking for anything, grasping at straws to find some sort of fault, some sort of incompatibility. Because when they find that fault, they're able to pinpoint their fears and blame it on you, so they don't have to self-reflect and take accountability. Accountability is very difficult for somebody who is severely avoidant. They have a core wound of shame, and it goes back to childhood when they were emotionally neglected. Because they didn't get the love and the nurturing in the way that they needed as a kid, they grew up to personalize it. They felt like it must be something wrong with them, that they must be defective and unlovable. That's a core shame wound. If they take accountability for their feelings, fears, and behaviors as an adult, it will be confirming their own inner defectiveness, their own inner faults and unlovability. So they look to find faults in their partner so they don't have to self-reflect, they don't have to take accountability, and they don't have to provoke that core wound of shame. And they can justify their fears and actions because you did something wrong. That way, they don't have to look within. When an avoidant is deactivating, it is a reflection of them, their fears, their attachment wounds. It is not a reflection of you or anything you did wrong. If you're a kind and loving partner and they're pushing you away, that's a reflection of their own emotional unavailability as well as their character. It's nothing that you caused. And there are various other deactivating strategies. And another really common one is fantasizing about other people, because they're comparing you to maybe a phantom ex, someone from their past that was so great and you can never live up to those standards. And because of that, they justify their fears. There's lots of little things they can do to create distance, but those are the top three. And if you're experiencing them, it's not your fault. Have some self-compassion, learn to hold boundaries, enforce your boundaries. And if it ultimately ends the relationship, well, you saved yourself time and emotional energy that you would have been investing into somebody who's not putting it into you. Don't forget, you have self-worth. Respect it. You don't deserve to be treated that way because you wouldn't treat them that way.